We have to purposefully examine the operating system if we want to learn how it affects the computer's operations. Culture is like this rule set operating in the background while influencing a group's thoughts and actions. Culture, like an operating system, receives updates and adjustments over time as more is learned and as it adjusts to new threats and opportunities. Culture, however, changes organically while an operating system relies on human intervention. Now, what's interesting about that is you have to check your culture sometimes. How do you check your culture? I'll give you one guess. What you do is you take a step back and you write down what the culture is. Now, here's where you might be led astray. I might think, I want to know about the culture in my platoon. So I write down my platoon, gets to work first. My platoon puts the job first. My platoon, we take care of each other. My platoon, we look sharp all the time. Whatever these things are. Mm-hmm. That's the culture in your platoon. I can't just interject a new culture line into that and have it just be, well, that's now the culture. You can't do that. Culture's, how are they describing it? Culture's organic. Yeah. Now listen, over time, you can make it, hardcore Recondos, right? The 439th with Hackworth. He interjected, hey, from now on, the salutation is hardcore Recondos, no fucking slack. And he says, at first, what did they do? They laughed. Go, lifer. Who's this freaking lifer, right? And then it started to creep into the consciousness. So you can't interject something and just expect it to be accepted. But as you interject something, and if you are a good leader and you set a good example and you start keeping your troops alive, which Hackworth did, and you start going on offense and you start winning and people start to embrace these things that you brought on board, you can make that culture have a shift. So what you have to be careful of and why it's good to step back and do an assessment and write down what you think your culture is so you make sure there's nothing in there that says, platoon comes first, screw everyone else. We don't want that culture. Now we need to start thinking, okay, I know I can't just line out, screw everyone else, and now we're good. I have to say, how am I going to slowly, organically change this culture into what it should be?
Dude, that's not easy, man. I mean, like you're describing that. I mean, God, I'm almost embarrassed to give my version of that or my example of that as a commander because compared to Hackworth, it's just so ridiculous. But when I took command, my first operational command as an F-35 squadron commander was the very first F-35 squadron in the Marine Corps ever. And what I was given in that squadron were Hornet guys and Harrier guys. And there were West Coast Hornet guys and East Coast Hornet guys. And you know this, probably similar in the teams, East Coast and West Coast, they're actually, in a lot of ways, very different. So if you flew Hornets on the West Coast, you got a lot of cultural norms that are different than Hornets on the East Coast. And then I got a whole different, so I had 4 different cultures really, Hornets, Harriers, East Coast, West Coast. And one of the first things I instituted when I got there as the commander, was like, we're F-35 guys. There's no more Hornet guy, and I don't care if your background, if you flew Harriers in Cherry Point or Hornets in Japan, it doesn't matter. Because there was some connotation like, the Hornet guys were better air-to-air, the Harrier guys are better air-to-ground because that's where they came from. Well, this new airplane, we need to do it all. So there was some resistance of, that's where I came from. That's my identity, and that's what we are. And it took some time to resist against, to push against that. But what I wanted the rest of the world to know about us was, this is what we do. Not this is where we used to do, this is where it came from. And so even some simple resistance at that, where I thought everyone's going to be on board with that, it took some time for guys to release that former identity of what we were. And I think in some ways it's good because it speaks to how strong the culture is. But the bigger issue is how hard it is to change the culture. And if they don't buy into it, it's never going to happen. If they don't buy into that change will not happen.
It has to be organic. It has to take. It's going to take time. Yeah. You have to plant the seeds. You have to let it grow inside their own minds. Right. You can do your best to plant seeds, but it's going to have to come from inside. You can't really impose. It's very difficult. Can't say you can't. It's difficult to impose culture.
Yeah.
Although culture has a wide variety of attributes, we will highlight time, risk, and mindset as we consider how culture might affect the way our rivals approach competition. Collectivists or group-focused cultures emphasize the importance of the group over the individual and often feel compelled to reach decisions by gaining consensus, which frequently takes time to develop. From an American orientation, this may appear to take too long. From a collective culture orientation, achieving consensus might be considered so important that taking months or even years to reach a decision is given higher priority. Neither perspective is objectively right or wrong, but each is logically consistent when viewed from its respective cultural orientation. I have a note here. My note says both these are wrong from a leadership perspective. Let them come up with the plan, let them come up with the idea and provide support to it. That's a lot faster. It's a lot faster for me to say, hey, Dave, hey, what does your team want to do here? I'll tell you what, come up with a plan and brief me on the plan. I'm not arguing. I'm not looking for consensus. I'm just looking for a good idea that's pretty close and we're going to run with it.
Just think how much easier does it get consensus when you're not trying to create the consensus?
Wait, I agree. Okay, we're done. We're done trying. We're done
Yeah.
quote, trying to get consensus.
I love your idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yes,
your
we have
idea is
consensus.
awesome.
Totally.
Yes. What about when there's 9 people? Cool. Help guide those 9 people to give consensus to each other. Consensus becomes a battle when you inject ego into it.
Yes.
Otherwise, we just ask some questions and we figure out what the best solution is and we move forward.
I had a question the other day, 2 days ago. What do you do when you check your ego, but you still want to do your plan? Mm-hmm. So it was someone talking about 2 people on their team. Mm-hmm. They both had different plans, same outcome, but different ways to do it. What happens when you check your ego and still want to do your plan? I'm like, well, actually, if you check your ego and you see that their plan is going to get to the same outcome, you'll do their plan. And it was kind of like, how often would you do that? My answer was 100% of the time, or at a minute, like as often as humanly possible. And just the only barrier to the things you're trying to accomplish, the barrier to consensus, is you. It's as long as you're aligned, as long as you're going to the same place, the only reason why you won't do it their way is your ego. And the minute you agree to do it their way, you have alignment and consensus and you're moving. And your life gets so much better.
Yeah. Because when I want to do it my way and Dave wants to do it Dave's way, and I spend 9 hours trying to present my case and he's arguing against me and he's actually going to do some research and bringing back some facts and figures, we already executed the plan. And I said, hey, Dave, that looks pretty good. Go with it. And by the way, also now, when I say, hey, Dave, dude, your plan looks awesome. Let's roll with it. How can I support? And then 2 hours later, I go, hey, Dave, there's this thing over here. Do you think I could adjust this? What's your attitude? Your attitude's up. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Make my plan even better. Right? That's what we're doing. And you mentioned it. The only time I can't come to consensus with you, if like I'm not getting there, if we can't figure out like my plan or your plan, I need to say, okay, wait a second. Where do you actually want to go? Well, are we aligned? Because if we're not actually going to the same place, if we're going to the same place, subordinate your ego and let's go. I'm good.
Totally.
This sounds like a great plan, Dave. It's going to take an extra 2 hours. Cool. I'm net 5 hours gained because I didn't spend 7 hours arguing. Different orientations also result in different attitudes towards identifying and weighing risk. This may lead to behavior that is surprising to us. For example, Chinese and Russian ships and aircraft have maneuvered in close proximity to U.S. forces, which appears to us as unnecessarily dangerous and operating against agreed international protocols. We may especially view such behavior as strange when we think of ourselves as at peace with them. Taking these risks might look quite different from another viewpoint. Operating this way may seem justified to those who see themselves in a condition of war without bloodshed or embracing without fighting. Finally, different cultures produce different mindsets. As mentioned above, culture is a system of beliefs, values, and behavioral norms that operate in the background below the level of conscious awareness. This produces a frame of mind that seeks to make the right choice in a given situation, with right being defined by these background factors. They have both those rights in quotes. This produces a frame of mind that seeks to make the, quote, right this choice in a given situation with, quote, right being defined by those background factors. This is also often labeled intuition. When somebody makes an intuitive choice while within their own culture, the choice is often judged as correct by others from that culture. This is because the criteria they use to determine if correct aligns with the beliefs, values, and norms that originally informed the intuitive choice. However, people from a different culture have different judging criteria originating from different values, beliefs, and norms, which leads them to intuitive choices likely quite different from ours. It will be difficult for people to explain why they made these choices because the criteria they used are below conscious thoughts. That's why when you are building a team, that's why culture is the purest form of decentralized command. Because they're making decisions without even thinking about it, and they're making the right decisions. If the culture is there, they can make a decision without even thinking about it. Without even thinking about it. They're making the right decision with no thought because the culture is strong. That's what we're trying to do. Hey, should I cut corners on this safety protocol? No, actually, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm going to do the right thing. Hey, Dave, you can't go out there without your proper PPE. Oh, yeah, sorry, got it. Yeah. You know what, I'm not going to say anything. Well, if the culture's there, the decision's already made. The decision's already made. We're doing the right thing. Think about that with everything that you're doing inside your organization. Your culture should drive decision-making all the way down to the frontline troops. And if you don't have good culture, what do you end up with? You end up with Abu Ghraib. Yeah. You end up with some frontline troops that are out there on their own. They don't have good culture, and they do dumb things. Dumb things that have a negative strategic impact. And I don't throw that word around lightly.
Yeah, and of course, I wrote DC in the margins. As you're reading that, I write down DC, and you're coming back to that. And you even went you're talking deep decentralized. I mean, all the way down at the highest level. If you're running a team, and just the basic level of decentralized command is what that culture allows them to do is make decisions without asking you questions. You know, in the first step of a decentralized command is, well, I've got 7 people on my team. I can't be with them all the time, and I need them to do stuff without me. How do I make that happen? And just, the culture is what allows that to happen, so they don't go, maybe I should call Jocko to see what I should do in this situation. I don't have to call you because I know what to do. So at the most basic level there, and then there's just a little warning inside there, though. That's just that tiny little warning that you highlighted is, oh, by the way, right is in quotes. So just let's not be so committed to our culture that we don't recognize that has to evolve over time as well. And we don't have to, just like you said, write down and make sure, hey, are my people not even critically thinking about anything anymore? Those decisions that are subconscious and so natural, am I to the point now where they are almost like devoid of consciousness of contemplating, is this the right thing to do in the big picture? And that the orientation, and I'm just pulling it back to the orientation of when it's almost perceived like an error. When somebody on my team, the team that has good culture, they do something that's an outlier, it's like the crash on the computer. Like, it is so obvious in this operating system. You have a massive error, and everybody sees it. But they made this point of like, they might not even be able to explain why they did it because it's below the level of consciousness. They are seeing something. Their perception is different. And that is a warning.
It's a warning.
Yes,
it's a warning that their culture is not there.
That's right.
I got 2 things on this. Number one, this is just a classic example that happened today. Jamie, operations director, Echelon Front. I'm talking to Pete, Origin, and we're going over something. And Jamie calls me. I'm like, I'll call you back. Give me 5. I text her. Talking to Pete, 45 seconds later, or 2 minutes later, she texts me, don't worry, made the call. And you know what I wrote back? approved. I don't even know what the call was.